This is a special meeting for the approval of the annual budget. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Ms. Seymour. Mr. Mandelbaum.
Here.
Ms. Morris. Here. Nancy.
Here.
Mr. Brightwell.
Here.
Mr. Cruz.
Present.
Mr. Frazier.
Here.
We have 7 members present.
Thank you. Mr. Zorn, would you like to start the presentation?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, our Director of Fiscal Services, Lynn Roberts, will be presenting the 2016-2017 budget. This process actually began early in January, going through meeting with various city departments, sharing information, historical costs. The budget itself identifies our budgets for the various charter requirements that we operate within the city: police, fire, parks and rec, library, water, sewer, many other component units. This budget also supports the goals that Council identified in its December 4th, 2016 visioning session, where you outlined 33 different goals for the city. Focuses on redevelopment, housing, our housing in neighborhoods, our commercial development, maintaining outstanding public safety, police and fire, our cultural arts programs, both our recreation and our library programs. Before we get started, Lynn Roberts and her team, Jim Pierce, Karen Ellie, spent a substantial amount of time, and I'd like to recognize them for their efforts. Also, Mike Radcliffe, the city assessor, is here in the event that there are any questions. At this time, Mr. President, I'd like to turn the presentation of the PowerPoint over to Lynn Roberts.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Council, Mr. Mayor, good evening. My name is Lynn Roberts, and I am here to present the 2016-2017 budget. What you see here, if you have it on the front of our lawn or in front of the Civic Center, you'll be able to see the hashtag Southfield Spirit. So I thought that would be a good way to introduce this city's budget. This is a great time in the city of Southfield. Southfield is a culturally diverse residential community. It also has a thriving international business community. And with that, I think this is a great opportunity for us to continue to provide great services to this city and this community and also in this region. So Southfield is truly the center of it all. The goal here tonight is to present a balanced budget to council. This balanced is budget. We'll go through some details on some specifics. We did address many of these items in May over 2 committee of the whole session, where we spent a great deal of time walking through each department's budget. But here, this is where we are going to formally get the budget adopted. Here, and I apologize, this is relatively small. We do have a larger print here, and it's also available in our comprehensive annual report. This is our organizational chart. And this organizational chart is, as of our last CAFR, but still talks through where we stand as an organization. Council and mayor, as well as the city administration, the clerk, the treasurer, I apologize, that's why you don't call names, and also our 46th District Court, we're all accountable to our citizens. And so that is who, at the end of the day, we have to be accountable to. Some of the highlights of our budget. And one of the things, as Mr. Zorn mentioned, is that we talked, or the city talked about a lot of goals. And as we went through the goals and as the management and budget department went through and talked through what we were going to accomplish or attempt to initiate with this budget, is to make sure that, number one, we were able to maintain consistent service levels to our citizens. And that is very important. We believe that our residents here deserve that. The city also will continue to support major road and infrastructure improvements. If you look out on Evergreen Road, that is a beautiful example of what we can do when we do responsible financing as well as budgeting that's what can happen. We'll also want to increase our code enforcement activities by adding an additional code officer that will help to maintain this and continue to beautify it as a community. And as well, to support our development efforts in this region, we're also going to hire some additional staff in our buildings department. The goals that were integrated into the budget was to continue to offer first-rate public safety services. We'll also provide outstanding cultural services in both our library and parks and recreation department. Continue to make improvements to rebuilding our infrastructure. That means the city-owned assets as well as the streets and water and sewer mains throughout our city. We'll also continue efforts to enhance future revenues by strengthening both our commercial and residential tax base. And this is important because as we go through and talk about some of the challenges we've had with our revenue, this is going to be very important in making sure that we can continue to maintain a stable level of income. We'll talk about this as well. The growth in taxable values is pretty much limited to the consumer price index or inflation, and it was only projected to increase by merely 0.3%, which means that we really pretty much had no growth in our property tax revenue. The other thing that I found very, very important is that there were no fund balance draws for operations in the general fund. And that is important to ensure that we have a structurally balanced budget. There were some use of fund balances projected for library and parks and rec, and we'll get a little more detail of that as we go through the presentation. And we also received revenue sharing from the state of Michigan. We based our budget based on projections that they provided to us. Vacancies will continue to be funded and filled only as considered necessary. So departments, anyone coming to request the addition of a position will have to have a business justification for why that position will need to be added. Projections for building revenues have been based on the fee schedules that were adopted in November. There were some ordinances that were recently adopted. Those, because we did not have that available at the time the budget was being adopted, those have not been included in these projections. So what we attempt to do is maintain relatively conservative projections on our revenue so that we don't overextend ourselves. There is a state constitutional requirement for us to fund the annual required contributions for the pensions. And so we have to make sure that we budget for those contributions for the pension plan. However, the funding for the retiree health care continues to be limited to pay-as-you-go. And what that means is we only pay claims for retirees. And that does not really address the reduction of our OPEB or other post-employment benefits liability, which is approximately $184 million. This is the citywide budget, $183,661,307. We have it clarified or notated by department. The general fund is projected at $67,872,000. The general fund revenues, I wanted to provide a little bit of a description on really where the majority of our revenue comes from. Property taxes make up 65% of our general fund revenue, and that is huge. It's 2/3 of our operating budget. And so it's very important that we monitor any fluctuation in property taxes and anything that causes any sensitivity to property taxes or the taxable values. So I'll give you a little bit more detail there. The other part is state revenue sharing. That's about $6.7 million. The district court generates about $4.1 million, which is made up of fines, court fees, and things of that nature. Sanitation charges are approximately $2.8 million. That is our rubbish and trash removal. And then building, engineering, and planning fees are about $2.4 million. There's also some other fees and reimbursements and other items that are generated throughout the course of within the general fund. Revenue for all funds is approximately $184 million. And so what we do is the general fund is a primary, at the end of the day, the general fund is a payer of last resort, but we also have other funds that contribute to the stability of this community. We also, the water and sewer fund generates about 36% of the city's revenue, and that is through our water and sewer rates. We also receive about $17 million in state revenue as well as other grants. And what we charge for fees, permits is approximately $41 million citywide. And again, there's property taxes, which is actually a little bit less than what we charge for water and sewer. Okay, this is just highlighting some of the major revenue sources again. So what impacts property tax revenue? It's sensitive because these are just a few that I think are a little bit obvious. Fluctuations in taxable revenue. And so the property taxes, as we go through the budget, taxable value is the base number that we use in order for us to determine what we are going to anticipate to collect in property taxes. So if taxable value goes up, then our revenue potentially, and I'll talk about some limitations, potentially should go up. If taxable value goes down, then our property tax revenue will go down. And what that means is when the crash came in 2008, 2009, the taxable values, property values began to fall, that meant that our property tax revenue fell as well. The other item that affects it are tax appeals. And so tax appeals would be when a resident or a commercial property owner will say, I don't believe my property is worth this amount of money. And so if they win that case and it lowers, then that means that the taxable value that we can use in our property tax calculations will go down as well. So that means in a sense the city will not get the full amount of the revenue if they win that case. We also have the Headley Amendment and Proposal A. And those are an interesting couple pieces of legislation. And I'll do my best to keep it as simple as possible. But at the end of the day, what Headley does, and actually I have some time, I'll talk about it here. The Headley Amendment keeps taxes from increasing more than inflation. And so if taxable value or taxes increase more than inflation, then you have to adjust it so that it's not more than inflation. And so the millage will roll back. Proposal A pretty much puts a cap on that, which says that you can only increase your taxable values by inflation or 5%. So if in this budget it only taxable values or inflation was 0.3%, that means that our the limitations of our property taxes are just very sensitive and are not growing at a fast pace. And so we talked about inflation also impacting. So even if inflation, just God forbid, I don't want to necessarily say that inflation will get to 10%, but that still means that we're going to be limited to 5% no matter how much inflation goes under this current legislation. This is just something I thought was very interesting. Our commercial residents make up about 45% of our taxable value, and residents make up approximately 38%. We also have personal property, which is an interesting piece because of the legislation. There are going to be different calculations in the way that we receive. We're not going to receive property tax revenue based on the old method. The current method that we're going to get is going to be based on some replacement income, and there's some other calculations for us to receive the replacement for personal property tax. And we also have some industrial property that is approximately 2% of our taxable value. This is one slide I thought was interesting. And so if you take a look at where we were in 2008 in terms of our taxable value, we were maybe about at $3.7 billion in 2008. The cap really was in 2009. So in order for us to even try to get back to that same level, and if we're looking at maybe inflationary factors increasing of about 2.5%, we're looking at 2035, which is pretty much about 20 years away. So what's happening is we're really going to have to not anticipate doing the business the way we've always done it, and with the same resources, because those same resources no longer exist and will not exist for a significant period of time. We are currently levying at our maximum levy. One of the things I wanted to point out is that I just wanted to highlight some of the year-to-year changes in tax revenues. We have our general operating millage, we had a decline of about 44 million. Police and fire millage, 46,000. I apologize, 44,000, 46,000. We also have the police and fire pension millage, where there was a slight increase of $13,000. And so these are some others, those are the highlights of where the major impacts. So for the most part, property taxes are going to be flat. The other thing that I wanted to highlight is that Parks and Rec and Library are very sensitive to property tax fluctuations because that is the primary source of their funding for their operations. So for the most part, the change in revenue for property taxes was relatively flat with no growth. State share revenue, just wanted to highlight this. We know that the state, the cap was maybe about 2001 when we had a high point in state share revenue. We are down to about $6.5 million. We know there's been a lot of discussion about the city's positions on what we believe should have happened, but at this particular point in time, this is where we are. The city continues to monitor fees for services to just make sure that we are covering the cost for providing certain services. So there are some things that we definitely have operating funds to cover. There's some that we definitely need to continue to evaluate to see if we're really charging the full scope of the cost to cover our services. Court revenue is contingent on caseload and collections on tickets and other fees. And so if there's, depending on the nature of the cases that are handled at the court, that's going to depend on the types of revenue that is generated there. The other thing I wanted to point out was that the rates for water and sewer will increase by 7.02%. General fund expenditures. As you can see, public safety takes up a large amount of the budget at about 59%. We also have administrative services. And one of the things that I do want to point out is that the city, I believe, provides great administrative services to its residents as well as its employees. This is where you have, services such as, our management and budget division, which includes payroll, accounting. We also have, our risk management, the assessment area, just some other areas that I just wanted to highlight that are important here for the city to function properly. We also have our building, engineering, and planning fees, sanitation, court, and community and economic development. That gets us to the $67.872 million. For all funds, again, we're spending $183 million. And again, public safety citywide only accounts for about 24%. Water and sewer makes up about 35% of our revenue, and a lot of those expenditures include some of the capital improvements that we plan to make over the next fiscal year. Roads and facilities as well. We have about $39 million budgeted to cover our facilities and our roads. Let's talk a little bit about public safety. I did state that public safety expenditures make up 65%. I thought this would give you guys some night break. Police and fire millages. A few years ago, there was an additional millage voted and approved to provide some additional resources for our police and fire. The current operating millage for police and fire is anticipated to generate about $16.2 million, as well as the pension millage will cover $10.3 million for pension expenses. Okay. Actually, I'll just go ahead with police. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that if you notice, the millages truly do not cover the full extent of the cost for police and fire. So, but all with all, that is the city's stance to continue to support these services because they're needed. For the police, the budget is $24.8 million, and it also includes some revenue that we're going to charge for services. Anytime there's overtime reimbursement or significant amounts of services that were provided, we do seek reimbursement for those services. They're also adding 2 civilian officers, a public safety supervisor and a clerk, and there's also some annual increases in benefit rates. But overall, this budget continues to support training efforts, operating supplies, and purchases. And one of the things that I have observed with the police department is that they are continuing to try to implement best practices to make sure that we're not just doing business as usual, but we're watching and monitoring our trends and implementing some of the new tactics that are in the public safety community. Fire, the budget is $2.3 million, no change in their staff. but again, continues to support the training efforts, operating supplies and equipment purchases for this department. I want to switch back to the 36th District Court. One of the things that I noticed when I talked to the judge as well as the court administrator is that they wanted to increase their efforts in collections, and so they were going to add a collections clerk to their staff to be able to pursue that. Their budget is $3.6 million. They do generate, they anticipate to generate about $4.1 million. Community and business development. This includes planning, buildings, code enforcement, and business development. And so I wanted to just, overall, just give a little bit of a highlight. We're anticipating about $4.1 million in expenses for the year that generate about $1.9 million. And with the fee schedule that was recently adopted for the buildings community, we do anticipate that the revenue generated will increase to cover those costs. Business development does receive some property tax revenue for Public Act 59 for publicity. That is approximately $50,000 that goes to support those efforts. Code enforcement generates some revenue for weed control when they have to go out and provide services and they are reimbursed, or the communities that are violators are charged for those services. And so again, I just wanted to note that the general fund does provide support above and beyond what the revenue generates for these activities. Okay. One of the main areas where I saw an increase in staff was in the buildings and the code enforcement department. Overall, the city had a net increase of 14 employees overall, and 3 of them will be in the buildings department and 1 will be in code enforcement. Library and Parks and Recreation. Library and Parks and Recreation, I believe, are to some extent the heart and soul of the city. And this is where a lot of our residents and people in the community come to participate or engage in some type of activity. And so the library's budget overall is $7.3 million. They have 24 employees. And the largest chunk of their revenue is property taxes, which is anticipated to generate about $6.6 million. Property taxes, as noted previously throughout this presentation, is that they are remaining flat, especially when compared to last year. And there is a planned use of fund balance of $215,000. In analyzing, I did note that the library has not used fund balance to cover its operations since 2012. However, they do have a planned use of fund balance here. There's no significant changes in expenses. The only thing I wanted to note was there was an increase for equipment and book purchases during the year. Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation provides a large volume of, I would say large, it provides a number of services to this community and anticipates to spend $6.8 million. There really have been no changes in fees for programs and special events, and as we go through the next couple of years, we'll definitely want to take a look at what we're really providing and what we are charging. Not necessarily saying that there will be increases, but it definitely, I think, deserves some additional assessment. Property taxes have again remained flat, and they did plan for a use of fund balance during this fiscal year of about $380,000. And so this is one of the departments I do want to make sure that we definitely budget cautiously and responsibly. Since, property taxes, we rely heavily on them, and they just have not been sufficient to cover the full scope of the operation. So we definitely want to keep that in mind as we move forward. And just to make note, I think this is an important fact, the Parks and Rec is responsible for administering and maintaining 9 facilities. They have 30 plus parks and 800 acres of grounds. I think that is a definite, a great observation of what this community has to offer. There are definitely no planned reduction of services at this time. Public Works and Infrastructure improvements. I thought this was a cool picture. I didn't know that they didn't have the bricks in place that are out there now, but I thought this was this was definitely, I hear all around, inside and outside of the community, how great of a addition to the roads that this was. sanitation. You see this red bin here, a little sidekick for the evening. During the year, there was actually, beginning on July 1st, a new trash and rubbish contractor was selected, which allowed us to get a savings of about 16%, and we can pass those on to residents where we'll be saving in excess of $30 per year on these services. The current rate would be at $161.47 passed on. Water and sewer. As we go through and work to improve the infrastructure of the roads, we're also taking a time to assess the needs of our water and sewer mains. So currently this year, there's 15 projects, capital projects that are planned for water and sewer, spending about $25.9 million. And about half, well, a little less than half, or a little more than half, $16.5 million will be funded from fund balance. And so that means that the more we can use, we have the cash available in-house, that's the less that we have to pass on to the residents. There is an increase of 7.02% in water and sewer rates for the year. 2 additional positions funded will include 2 billing clerks. I think that it's very important that we know that in order to increase the revenue, we have to be able to collect and generate invoices on a timely basis. So this is one of the efforts to make sure that we're doing everything we can to cover our revenue. Major and local streets. So there is a portion of property taxes, there was a millage that was voted on a year or so ago before I got here, in order for us to issue debt to do some major repairs and reconstruction to our roads. And so the revenues in property tax that we're collecting is to pay the debt service on those bonds. We do also get some Act 51 money that will also help cover the cost of providing these road services. Some of the operating expenditures, as I've noted, is that as we continue to improve the infrastructure, the road infrastructure, we're finding that some of our costs are beginning to decrease. So my observation has been that we have a great reduction in the number of water main breaks that we have here. Also here we'll see that there's a reduced need for spot concrete, asphalt, and joint sealing and supplies that were previously needed for repairs and maintenance. And we'll continue to spend the bond money to cover the costs for those road improvements. Long-term financial planning. This is a very, very, very important element. As a finance director and as a council and as a city, we need to be concerned about. Legacy costs, and I just want to define it for the public, are costs that are committed to and incurred and carried forward in the future. And so our major capital or legacy costs will include pensions and OPEB, our other post-employment benefits, as well as our infrastructure, our city-owned assets that we have here. I do want to highlight a couple of points here so that we can make note of where we stand with some of these legacy costs. Our pension plans, services funded at 78%, fire and police is funded at 84 or 85%, which is not 100% stellar. But that is us moving in the right direction. We have been committed, and the city of Southfield is committed to making sure that we meet our annual required contribution for our pension plans. That is a constitutional requirement, state constitutional requirement. For our other post-employment benefits, it's not necessarily as favorable. We only have CSRS, retiree health care funded at 14.7%, and fire and police is funded at 30.4%. So it's important to know this. These liabilities are not small. I mentioned at the opening of the presentation that they're in the range of $185 million. And so we have to find a delicate balance of making sure that we control how much we're going to grow. Because as healthcare inflation rates continue to grow, those liabilities are going to grow. These items also will have an impact. There's some new Governmental Accounting Standard Board pronouncements or GASBs that are on the horizon. We did see one implemented last year that hit our financial statements. And so the pension liability and expense was recorded on the books. We're going to be seeing that as well in the next couple fiscal years, where we'll be seeing a full liability for the OPEB costs hitting the the financial statements. And what does that really mean? What that means is that as we, go out as a community, and there are a lot of other factors, and stakeholders who will take a look at, well, what is City of Southfield doing? How are they controlling their costs? And especially when we go out to issue debt, this will be a factor that will come up in the conversation, just to make sure that we are not spending well above our means and that we can maintain and continue to spend what we've committed to in legacy costs, or not necessarily committed to, but what we currently offer. Another item I talked about was deferred maintenance of capital improvements. It is a known fact that there are some areas in the city campus that we've deferred. And we're going to make a commitment to, may not be able to do all of them, but we've been able to budget for some so that we can continue to make those improvements and make this, continue to make it a good environment to work in. We have to continue to find ways to grow the city's tax base. We have to be creative and think outside of the box so that we can continue to grow it. If we maintain a status quo, there will not be much growth in our property tax revenues. We have to work on right-sizing the city's operations. What is the right and delicate balance for us to accomplish the goals of this organization? The other item that's near and dear to me is deficit avoidance and responsible budgeting. And it is my goal to make sure that we do everything to avoid a deficit, to avoid being in a situation where we have to declare a financial emergency. And we have to be responsible in how we continue to budget. And with that, I'd like to thank City Council, Mayor, Fred Zorn, City Administrator, thank you. All the department heads and staff, members of the community and all residents. And I have to give an appreciation to Karen Ellie and Jim Pierce. This is my first year here, and I would not have been able to accomplish it without them. So with that, thank you. Any questions?
Okay. If you will step aside, this is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on the budget? If you come to the microphone, you have 3 minutes.
Pamela Juro, P.O. Box 155, Southfield, Michigan 48037-0155. My telephone number is 248-346-0439. My only concern about the budget is the fact that other areas, Oakland County and other cities, they do a budget for 3 years, and it seems to work out a lot better. Why does the city of Southfield only do budgets yearly? The second thing I wanted to ask is, obviously you have not included employee raises in your budget, and I appreciate Ms. Lynn Roberts for talking about the legacy costs. But the fact that you haven't settled those contracts and given out raises through the chair, the city administrator, Mr. Fred Zorn, you keep talking about legacy costs. And I think it's a bit insulting to find out that that's your concern, but the pensions are underfunded. And now it's required that you bring it up to par. So why don't you do this for me and the people? Why don't you do a presentation on legacy costs and show us if you gave the employees a 2% or 3% or 5% raise, like all the other cities are giving their employees to make them whole, what would be the effects, adverse or not, for legacy costs? And then I might have a different opinion.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, is there any discussion? Any questions?
I want to thank Chair, I want to thank Lynn for the job that she did and all the staff that she used to accomplish this. I know it's been very difficult because of the 0.3% and the other costs that we have, but they did come up with a balanced budget, and I really want to compliment them for the job they did.
Any other comments? I would also like to say thank you very much. I know you've spent a lot of midnight hours working on the budget, and for the first year, I think you've done a marvelous job. clarifying the issues that we need to face in the future and identifying those pieces that make the budget work and in a way that people can understand it. So again, I applaud you for what you've done. The danger of what I just said and what you have done in this past year is that you set the minimum standard.
Oh, man, I
So, okay, Mr. Brightwell.
Yeah, I want to sort of just interact on what has been stated by Mr. Fakasi and Mr. Frazier. As chair of the Finance Committee, I have the opportunity to meet with Lynn on a monthly basis, and she has been stellar with respect to her and her group furnishing reports that are required by the Finance Committee, and I just want to thank her. And this presentation was a stellar presentation I've sat through numerous corporate budget meetings historically, and this has been a good and fair presentation of the status of the city and the finances of the city. So thank you, Lynn. And as Mr. Frazier said, that we have a new normal with respect to expectations. So thank you.
Okay. Mayor.
Yeah, I would just go along with everything that's been said, in that we started this process in January, and this is my first time working with Lynn, and she made it easy for me, and was very helpful. I had questions. She came to my office. We, worked a lot of things out or through, and I appreciated the help that she gave me, and it made it easier for me to present the budget to the council on May 9th. So thank you as well.
Mr. President, I too would like to also acknowledge Lynn and Karen Nelly and Jim Parrish for their efforts. I would like to make a comment. When we use the term legacy costs, that includes the unfunded pension obligations and the unfunded OPEB, other post-employment benefits. And we didn't put the total number in there, but that is a $185 million liability. And I also want to point out, in the collective bargaining arena, we are and have offered raises in that process. And we are continuing, in the next 2 weeks, our bargaining team will spend 3 solid days in negotiations.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Well, we're here to approve the budget for 2016-2017. Council, what do you wish?
President, I move that we would approve, that this council approve the budget as presented for 2016-2017 for the city of Southfield.
It's been moved by Mr. Cruz, supported by Mr. Brightwell, that we approve the budget as presented for 2016 and 2017. It takes 5 votes to approve the budget. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Ms. Seymour?
Yes.
Mr. Villalobos?
Yes.
Ms. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Fracassi?
Yes,
Mr. Brightwell?
Yes.
Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
You have 7 members in favor of approving the budget.
Thank you. This concludes our budget meeting.